The Quarterly, Lamentations, Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes. Lesson 7, Song of Songs 5:2 to 6:3, Searching. The previous passage described the couple's wedding and the consummation of their relationship, chapter 4:8 to 5:1. In a Hollywood love story, that would be the end. However, in real life, marriage is a new beginning, often into a whole new set of complications and relational difficulties. We're all deeply flawed sinners who will fail and disappoint our spouses in 1,000 different ways. This is what this portion of the Song of Songs depicts. The glorious intimacy that the lovers entered through marriage is threatened and lost for a time, before finally being restored after a lengthy search. The same dynamic is also true in our relationship with God through Christ. Although Christ is the perfect husband to his bride, our relational problems with him are not vaporized the moment we commit our hearts to him. We are called to a lifelong pursuit of Christ, as we continually sin against him and then reach out afresh in repentance, pressing onwards in search of true intimacy with God. Yet we should be encouraged in our pursuit of him by God's unfailing commitment to pursue us, even when we are running as fast as we can in the opposite direction. The passage begins with the woman half asleep, chapter 5, verse 2. This explains the bizarre events that follow, which are typical of dreams, but not of everyday life. What the woman heard at the beginning of the poem was exactly the same thing she heard back in chapter 2, verse 8, the sound of my beloved, chapter 5, verse 2. On both occasions, he was outside while she was within. Both times he addresses her sweetly, in this case combining several of his favorite terms of endearment for her: my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one, verse 2. And both times she refused him. However, the similarities between the passages heighten the contrasts. In chapter 2, the man desired her to come outside with him into the open country, to engage in premarital sex. Now he desires to come inside to enjoy the intimacy that is appropriate given their married state. But once again she says no. Her reasons for refusing her husband are the flimsiest possible. I've taken off my robe, must I put it back on again? I've washed my feet, do I have to dirty them again? Verse 3. It seems that she is quite content to leave him outside in the cold and rain, rather than make the slightest effort to get out of her comfortable bed. The man made a final and unsuccessful attempt to bridge the gap from his side by reaching an arm through the peephole in the door. Verse 4. Then, suddenly, something changed the woman's mind. Her insides were in turmoil, a phrase that could simply mean that her emotions were aroused or that she was responding with sexual desire. She finally went to open the door to him, her fingers dripping with liquid myrrh, now ready to welcome him into her bed and her body. Chapter 5, verse 5. But by the time the woman completed the slow-motion action of getting out of bed and fumbling with the bolt, her beloved had turned and gone, unwilling to play her games. When she chased after him in her dream, scantily dressed, the watchman found her and immediately struck and bruised her, taking away her mantle. Verse 7. Presumably they took her to be a prostitute, especially if her mantle is to be understood as a light garment rather than a proper covering. The irony is profound. The watchman of the walls, part of whose job it was to guard against illicit sexual encounters, punished her for her unwillingness to pursue a lawful sexual encounter with her own husband. The woman's encounter with the daughters of Jerusalem was much more helpful, verses 8 and 9. Whereas she had previously charged the daughters of Jerusalem not to stir up love too soon, now she charges them to tell her beloved that she is sick with love. Instead of rebuking or beating her, the daughters of Jerusalem ask her questions. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O most beautiful among women? Verse 9. These questions gently prod her to reflect on the nature of her beloved and of their relationship, and force her to face up to the heart of her fears, which is the fear of abandonment. In response, the woman launches into a description of her man, beginning with a general statement about his appearance and then moving downward from his head to his feet. He is radiant and ruddy, verse 10, like King David in his youth, glowing with health. He's distinguished among 10,000, verse 10, using a word with military connotations. Unlike Solomon, hiding behind his 60 mighty men in chapter 3, verse 7, her man is at the forefront of the battle. His head is of gold, verse 11, a description that refers to his glowing appearance and value rather than his hair color. His hair is actually described as black like a raven and wild and curly like date flowers. His eyes are like doves, verse 12, and his cheeks are scented like flower beds of spices, verse 13, while his lips are like lilies dripping with liquid myrrh. Moving down his anatomy, we shift from images of smell and taste to visual images of strength and beauty. His arms are rods of gold set with jasper, verse 14. His legs are pillars of alabaster in sockets of gold, verse 15. His ripped abdomen is like a plate of ivory inlaid with lapis lazuli. And she ends, as she began, with a more general statement about the beauty of her beloved. As in chapter 2, he is tall and straight like a tree, though this time she compares him to a mighty cedar of Lebanon, rather than a more homely apple tree, verse 15. She still celebrates the sweet taste of his fruit, and so the center and end of her description both focus on his lips, verse 13 and 16, which are the source of those kisses that she once again desires. Strikingly, the woman's description connects the man with herself in a number of key respects. His eyes are doves, just like hers. The same myrrh that was dripping from her hands now drips from his lips. She ends up calling him my darling, verse 16. And this is the only place where she uses this term for him, which is one of his favorite terms for her. It's as if when she looks at her beloved, the woman recognizes that he is the true complement of herself. Their shared love makes one flesh from the two of them. At this point, the daughters of Jerusalem ask the woman another question. Where is your beloved gone? And this simple question apparently unlocks all the insight that the woman needs. After talking to them, she now knows where her true love is to be found. She says, my beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. Chapter 6, verses 2 to 3. Now, if we connect what she is saying with the rest of the song, then her thoughts become clear. She is his garden. The beds of spices are his cheeks. When he described her body, the man spoke of her breasts as twin gazelles grazing among the lilies. Chapter 4, verse 5. And the phrase, my beloved is mine and I am his, he grazes among the lilies, comes directly out of her own words in chapter 2:16. In other words, the woman is saying, I've been out in the streets, desperately searching for my beloved, as if he were lost forever, but he's not lost. We belong together. Even if we sin against each other, there's a bond between us that can never be broken. My beloved is mine, and I am his. This time she reverses the statement from chapter 2, saying, I am my beloved's, chapter 6, verse 3. And that's significant, because it was the failure to remember that I am my beloved's which triggered this whole episode. She was reluctant to get up and open the door, because she was thinking only of herself and her own desires. Furthermore, it was her failure to remember that I am my beloved's that triggered her panicked nighttime search for him. She was terrified that because of her selfishness, she had lost him forever. But when the daughters of Jerusalem prompted her to think about who her beloved really was, she finally realized she didn't need to be afraid of losing him. She had forgotten the permanence of the man's commitment to her. And this, combined with his trustworthy character, meant that she could rest assured that he would always come back and be reconciled with her, even when she had sinned against him in real ways. Application questions. 1. I love the honesty of the song in relating the reality that married couples still struggle. So why is sex so often a challenging area for married couples to agree about? 2. How does the teaching of this passage address those who are not currently married? 3. What thoughts change the perspective of the woman and finally give her peace? 4. How does the gospel comfort us when we feel abandoned and alone?